veins, then let us sing. Advance Australia fair.
G'day, listeners. You are listening to the Natives Rouseabout podcast. I'm your host, Michael, and today we will be discussing Nativist lifestyle advice. So we'll cover a few different topics of life, including physical, career, cultural, lifestyle, financial, and possibly even more depending on how lazy we are or are not. And joining us today, we have James and Thomas. How are you going, boys?
Yeah, pretty good.
Yeah, good, mate. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad. So, James, much going on with you?
Oh, not much, mate. It's been a little bit rainy up here in the Sunshine State, ironically. But I've heard that you fellas are kind of sweltering through a bit of a heat wave down south. Is that right?
Yeah, it's been pretty bloody hot. Hot
by our standards, anyway.
Yeah, Here it's a bit more consistent. It's just humid. That's kind of the way it goes, ironically. Like, I don't know, we're in Melbourne, you kind of just get like a 40 out of nowhere, but it's sort of like 31, 32 this way.
I've been making very good use of my air conditioner recently.
Yeah.
Done,
fair
mate.
enough. And always got to keep in mind the climate when you pick somewhere to settle. But before we jump into getting into the main topic, let's do our usual poetry segment. So, poem of the show is the Convicts' Rum Song, which is an anonymous one. There we go. Cut your name across me backbone, stretch me skin across a drum, iron me up on Pinchgut Island from today till kingdom come. I will eat your Norfolk dumpling like a juicy Spanish plum, even dance the Newgate hornpipe if you'll only give me rum. So there we go. That was the Convicts' Rum Song. Nice and simple. And the first bit of advice is don't spend all your time drinking because it's not good for your finances. And it's definitely not good for your health.
Yeah, I can just imagine myself singing that while like washing up to shore in like Agnes Water 1770 in Queensland, mate.
Yeah. All right. So first bit of advice given, going into lifestyle, James, I think you said you had a few points you wanted to raise at the start of this one.
Yeah, well, I think that I think that in terms of lifestyle, what I'll probably start off with is by saying that everyone is going to be time poor no matter what. It's really just a sort of question of how you organize not only your time, but also your energy. And I think that energy management is probably a big thing, especially if you want to commit yourself to something like a nativist or nationalist organization and sort of maybe do something like extracurricular with your time like that. Or even if it's just participating in sort of like contemporary politics and you just want to do it by just participating in like a party. But I feel like people in our spheres, they really nail down a lot of the intellectual pursuits very, very well. They will typically be very, very studious and they spend a lot of time reading and doing these things very, very well. Something that can potentially be missed out on, especially if you have a family as well, is that if you don't have like a sporting background, usually getting those sort of like steps in throughout the day, so to speak, can kind of be a little bit difficult to get. I think that everyone should just basically participate in lifting weights or running or doing something like at a minimum once a week, or preferably sort of like 2, 3, or even 4 times a week. And that's basically just advice that I've just developed just based on wellness, but then also just trying to just be in a more sort of contemporary sense, just the best version of yourself. I want to really focus on energy management though, because energy management is probably the biggest hurdle that you're going to face, especially if you have a family. These things can absolutely drain the life out of you. I don't personally myself have one, but I have definitely witnessed as the new one comes along. Energy is probably the thing that drains the most out of, and I'm sure you guys can probably agree with me on that if you've got some young ones in your life.
Yeah, definitely agree. I think energy management is probably more important than time management.
Yeah, 100%.
You often find yourself drained on the couch or whatever for the last hour or whatever of your day, and you could fit all sorts of important things in, but you just don't feel like.
Yeah, 100%. Now, as someone that doesn't yet have children, probably the biggest thing that I've learned about energy management, and I do agree with you that energy management is definitely a more important thing to have than time management, but the way that a sort of general thing that we would say, maybe if we're training in the gym, is to sort of, if you have to split something up between cardio and weights, do the thing that you care about first. So if you want to try and put some strength on, lift some weights first and then run. But if we can actually extrapolate that to a more sort of like holistic view throughout your entire day, you should try and get the thing that takes a lot of your vitality done, ideally when you're fresh out of bed and you are ready to just attack the day after that. For this reason, I prefer to make sure I'm in the gym before work. A lot of people I know prefer training after work. That's something that I'm not particularly a fan of for a couple of reasons. Probably for more personal reasons from my perspective is central nervous system stimulation. I find that if I kind of do too much activity right after work, I'll kind of be too stimulated to get a good night's sleep, which is something to be mindful of. And I'm sure that you guys have probably experienced this. If you're on your phone too late, or if you're dealing with the kids too late, you'll be kind of wired up. And then that also kind of has the second order effect of keeping you awake as well.
Yeah, a tea normally does that for me, actually, but I get what you're saying.
Yeah, definitely. I find that avoiding really hyper stimulating stuff like lifting weights after work is probably the best go, because that helps me get to sleep earlier. But on the flip side of that as well, I will try to get a good weight session in before I start work, just so that I'm fresh out of bed. I'm not kind of like drained when I do it. I can just get in there, make sure I'm focused on that, and then start my work day after I'm kind of like pepped up after that. And generally, if I allocate my energy resources that way, I find that by the time I'm ready to roll back to sleep or get ready for sleep after work, I'm kind of calmed down enough as well. So it's kind of like a balancing act of making sure that you're allocating your resources throughout the day in the correct way, and not just your time resources, because I think that ordering it based on energy is the important way. But maybe you guys can sort of speak about integrating this with maybe children as well. I'm not sure if you guys have any sort of like advice based on that as well.
Well, Thomas, you're the one with their children, so you go ahead.
Oh, well, yeah, I think going in the morning might be a better use of time and energy, because I find that when you get home, it's a bit of a war zone. And then at the end, the last thing you want to be doing is working out. So I think it would depend on everyone, on their own personal
definitely.
situations. But I can definitely see the appeal of doing it in the morning.
Yeah, I would say a good rule of thumb is you're only as good as your first hour of the day. So if you spend your first hour of the day, just lying in bed or, whatever it is, taking half an hour to get up through 50 alarms, which, I used to do a bit. So you've got to,
I think we've all been guilty of that at some point, maybe like your early 20s.
Sorry. If you don't have the energy in the first place, you've got to make sure some of the other sort of prerequisites for that are all sorted as well. So you mentioned the sleep hygiene, James, and I think that's very important, getting enough sleep, because basically sleep and food are your fuel. And if you don't look after that, you're just going to run out of energy no matter how you sort of plan. So you've got to make sure that you're taking care of yourself. The other thing is that some people can mistake low energy with lethargy as well. So if you have a lifestyle at the moment where you're not getting involved in a lot of physical activity or very minimal physical activity, and you've got, say, a desk job, you're just sitting in front of a computer all day, you may end up sort of adapting to that and feeling lethargic and like you have low energy. So you've got to make sure you also push your body to adapt to the lifestyle that you want. So, you can go too far with the grind set stuff and the memes, but you've also got to kind of set an expectation for yourself about how much you can get done. Usually people are doing a lot less than their full capacity, I suppose.
Yeah, for sure.
I think that people don't really well, there's kind of two flip sides to this as well, because you kind of touched on that kind of grind set mentality. And I feel like a lot of Gen Z, especially, it felt like the kind of 2022 era to me, when Gen Z was just so focused on hitting the grind set 24/7 to kind of an unhealthy extent, I would say. So I would say that the optimum solution is definitely somewhere in the middle. You don't want to be probably a full grind set warrior, but you don't want to neglect essential parts of your life, which are intellectual and community political pursuits combined with your physical pursuits. But
you definitely can run yourself too ragged. So there is always that danger. So you've got to be sort of aware of yourself, your mental state, because if you do try and do too many things at once, your body will start failing on you eventually.
Yeah, and you'll find out the hard way.
Yeah.
As
I
Aristotle
want to
said,
touch on.
virtue is in the mean. The virtue is in the mean. So you've got to have that mean position where you're not doing too little, you're not doing too much, and that'll apply to most things in life.
Yeah.
Should we talk a bit about getting started in say like the physical and the martial arts and that sort of stuff? Because I think if you are a bloke, and imagine most of our listeners are men, I believe that you should have a martial aspect to your life, as well as a more cultural and sophisticated one as well. But you've got to have that sort of brutality, and that's something as well I've noticed will give people a lot more confidence as well. So if you have a sort of mentality where you're not a very confident guy, one thing you can do about it, I think, is learn to fight, essentially, because you will become, I think, a lot more comfortable in your skin. You won't feel basically like you always have to defer to someone else, because you'll know that you can take care of yourself. But yeah, that was my little opening spiel. Physical, martial. James, you want to cover some of the physical stuff?
Oh, just before that, I just wanted to say that, sorry, just to butt in for a minute.
Have we lost you, Thomas?
It sounds like we may have lost Thomas.
While he's gone, Michael, I was going to ask you, mate, what's the martial art that you've gotten into? Because I've done like a tiny bit of Muay Thai training like way back in the day, but if I am being honest with myself, it's probably something that I haven't gone far enough down the rabbit hole. So what's the one that you've got into?
Yeah, look, when I started as a kid, my parents basically put me into a karate McDojo. So my early experience was very light, sort of
dojo, you're right.
A lot of kata and sort of line drills and stuff, which I think it's still good for the physicality. It can be helpful for kids, and kids don't necessarily need to be punching each other in the head all the time. But yeah, I've also done some Thai boxing and a little bit of wrestling, and I've sort of come back full circle, and I like the concepts in karate. That's sort of like real karate, which is clinch range fighting, which is sort of stand-up grappling, and generally the old masters would incorporate judo as well, so it'd be stand-up grappling, striking, throwing in a sort of close range situation, because there's a difference, and we can kind of get into it a bit now, I guess. There's a difference between any martial art is practiced as a sport. So kickboxing as a sport where two people will face off and then, sort of stay in that punching, kicking range, or maybe clinch up a bit if it's Thai boxing. But, if you sort of get stuck, the ref will break you apart and you're back apart. But real fights tend to start unexpectedly at a closer range, sort of not necessarily at kicking range, but more your maybe elbow headbutt range, and your stand-up grappling range. So a lot of karate concepts sort of start from that position. But yeah, so I think basically it doesn't really matter, I would say to people, what you start with, as long as your coach is good, because what really matters is how you train and what you're training for. So anything can be good if you train it with a non-compliant, partner or opponent. So if you can't find that in a gym, you probably need to move. But if you've also got mates that can spar with you, then really anything works, I think. And to be all-rounded, you definitely want to do a bit of grappling of some kind, preferably stand-up, because I think, look, it can be good to know, say, your jiu-jitsu and your ground game, but in the real world, if you're going up against more than one person, like you're essentially screwed if you're on the ground. So you probably want to focus more on learning to stay on your feet. But yeah, that would be my kind of intro to martial arts. Like I'm pretty broad-minded about it. I think a lot of people kind of get fanboyish and be like, oh no, only Thai boxing and jiu-jitsu, man, because that's all that works in MMA. But you got to remember, everything's limited. Every sport's limited by its rule set. Even MMA, right? The gloves might be small. They've still got gloves on. You've still got some rules. So it changes the whole scenario.
Yeah, I've definitely noticed that BJJ has got that mindset about it, where people that do BJJ, they're kind of convinced that it's like the only thing that's ever going to happen to them.
Yeah, well, the Gracies were very, very good advertisers, very, very smart businessmen. So,
so do you think it's sort of like marketing and like politics in some way, and then that attitude's downstream from that?
Yeah, but look, I reckon as long as you get started in something, and some people will find, maybe they'll find grappling a little less intimidating than striking art. One thing I would say for the vast majority of people is to not probably don't pick like boxing or something if you're a white collar person, because you don't want to be getting punched in the head all the time, even Thai boxing necessarily. If you can, like, spar with a rule set where you're avoiding head punches or doing it only infrequently, especially in your hard sparring, because you don't need the repetitive impact to the brain. That'll basically cut your career short. And if you keep doing
that's
it
an
too long,
interesting point.
even when you're a young guy, you're going to start feeling like effects, like weird water sounds in your ears and all sorts of stuff. So it's just not worth it.
Have you had that happen to you at all?
A violent encounter, and I've never actually been in a street fight or anything. So it's I think the biggest benefits of martial arts are probably confidence, unless you want to really get into the sport aspect.
Have you had that happen to you at all, where you've sort of started to hear these sounds just from sparring a lot, and then just having these
No, it's happened to other people I know. I don't spar that much with head punches, so.
Yeah, that's probably it's probably a good point to make. I mean, there's probably the threshold for actually getting some sort of damage with these head strikes is probably quite low.
Yeah. It can be. It's especially sort of getting punched one day and the next day in close, sort of temporal succession.
Yeah,
that's particularly bad. I might just find what's happened to Thomas, and we can edit out this little bit. But I'm gonna see if this bloke's coming back or what.
I'm still here.
You're here.
I've been here this whole time.
I thought you dropped out, mate.
No.
Yeah, you started talking.
Like you dropped out.
And you just were gone for a couple of seconds.
Yeah, fair enough.
All right. Well, do you want to say what you were going to say, Thomas?
Yeah. So there's basically two kinds of physical security. There's one like organizational association kind of physical security, where you can kind of represent and protect a certain group, and that's to some extent what ANA will be seeking to do sometime in the future. But even in that case, ANA or whatever other group aren't always going to be around. Usually it's just going to be you defending your family. So you can't rely on other people to protect your family. There's all sorts of stuff going on in the world. We all know what these things are. The world isn't necessarily going in a better place. So at the end of the day, the most responsible person for your own safety and your own family safety is you. And so learning to do these things yourself, wise.
Yeah, no, I do agree with that as well. It may not happen to you, but if it does happen to you, you want to know what you're doing. And the thing I would say with that is that, again, that's something you have to specifically train for. So if you train all the time in a sports setting, which everywhere where you train is going to be a sports or rule-based setting, you get trained to start your aggression when, the coach blows the whistle, or, the small Japanese man says hajime or whatever, right? But obviously, when you're out and something happens to you, somebody attacks you or aggressors against you, you're not going to have a small little Japanese man there telling you to start. So you need to train the aspects you need for that, which are things like awareness. So don't go around with your head stuck in your phone. That's a mistake I've even made in my own life in the city. Possibly the worst possible time for it. I was a young guy, so not really thinking about these things as much as I have now. But head in my phone at the bus stop, New Year's Eve. It's pretty late, and about 40 Africans came past, and they didn't actually jump me, but they were monkeying about, we could say, right? They were trying to slap my phone out of my hands and getting up in my face. So I was just lucky there, and I mean, that's a situation where, if 40 blokes attack you, chances are you don't have the skill set, even training, to deal with that. It'd be a pretty rare person who might luck out of that situation. So that's sort of more a decision-making thing. So again, this is all security stuff, but it's all stuff that leads into the fight, or ideally, if you plan things properly, doesn't lead into a fight. So you got to make sure, spatial awareness, don't have, headphones in or whatever, because you're taking away one of your senses, and make sure the body signs of aggression or particular sort of indicators that somebody might be coming at you. There's a very good book on it by the guys at Australian Kinetic Fighting. So can't remember. It's by a bloke called, I think, Matthew Wan. I think it's Predictors of Violence, something like that. So yeah, if you if you want to be serious about it, that's a really good book. And there's another really good one called How to Be Your Own Bodyguard by Nick Hughes, who's another Aussie bloke. And yeah, so those two books highly recommend to take your security seriously. Yeah, I think we've covered a fair bit of that. But we could possibly talk about the more meta stuff and lean in this way. I mean, part of security is going to be choosing where you situate yourself, your financial security, your options that you have based on your career. So kind of all these things are very holistic. I mean, that's the nature of life, right? All the different areas we're going to talk about today feed into each other. So Thomas, where do you want to go from here?
I'm not sure if you couldn't hear me before trying to butt in a few times or how my audio is. So I'm a bit not confident in my audio at the moment. Just wanted to add that, the more confident you are and the fitter you look, the less likely these sorts of troubles will come to you as well if you look like an easy mark.
Yeah, actually, that's a really funny one because a study's been done on that. And like the study was conducted with criminals who were in jail, right? And basically they showed them videos of people walking through the like shopping center and down the street, and they asked them to like select the ideal targets. And it wasn't always the ones that you would necessarily think. Like it wasn't like 100% of the time we're going to go for this like small Sheila or whatever. Like sometimes they'd pick a big guy and a muscly guy, and a lot of it was actually like things you wouldn't expect, like the pace that people walked, their posture, right? So maybe somebody who is like looking at the ground and walking like at a funny speed, maybe they're walking too fast or they're walking too slow. It's kind of like indicator that this could be like a potential, like this could be prey.
Yeah.
So that, yeah, you can get big, and that's obviously going to help. And it's definitely going to help if you get in a fight, like untrained against untrained, the big guy is going to beat the small guy. And even, it's a big advantage, whatever your characteristics are. But yeah, like there are other things involved as well that will, so that like the confidence aspect of it and situational awareness, et cetera, all those things. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I was going to say before, if you see like a group of 40 males looking menacing, let's say, the best thing that you can do is just walk the other way. Like there's absolutely no way that you're going to come out on top of that. Yeah, and I think that sort of picking your battle, so to speak, is pretty important. Like crossing the road to avoid a confrontation is much better than sort of being proud and then actually walking into a confrontation, I would say.
Yeah.
Yeah, people think self-defense is the like act of beating someone up, but self-defense is like something that you have to defend yourself in court in front of potentially a judge and jury and say, hey, I used a reasonable amount of force and it was an act of, self-defense. It's not self-defense if you neutralize someone and then soccer kick them in the head 5 times, you're probably going to jail, right? So yeah, there's all these different aspects you have to keep in mind, and that's really an A&A thing as well. Like a lot of these things we've been talking about on the individual level, we think about that strategically as well at an organizational level as a group of people. So it could be, when we're talking about groups, it could be the association or it could be your family as well. So you've got to sort of practice good decision making in every aspect of life. So one thing that I guess is really important might be financial autonomy, your financial success, and your career. So do we want to talk about that?
Sure.
Yeah, all right. James, what do you think are some key points there with career?
Well, so because I've got my spreadsheet open right in front of me, actually, I'll cover the finances thing first, if that's okay.
Yeah, no worries.
So I'm a little bit funny with the finances thing because I tell some people my strategy and I actually offer them my strategy, but they seem to not like it very much. But I basically have a spreadsheet that has every single purchase I've made on it since 2021, and I can tell you what I purchased on what day, and it's been tracked literally to the dollar by the day since then. I've offered this advice up to a couple of friends, and I've shown them my spreadsheet, and they've all said something along the lines of, "It's too much. I don't like it." I'm a little bit funny with that sort of thing where I just like to see the brutal cold numbers of the whole thing, and that actually does help me. I find a lot of solace in knowing exactly what goes on. You know, I've heard there's the barefoot investor thing where it's like your mojo bucket and you're this bucket, and I personally think that all that is a waste of time. I that's just my take though. What I did was, and what my advice to you is that just list out every single one of your monthly expenses, see what you need to make basically to cover that, and then add on a chunk for annual expenses. So my annual expenses are sort of like miscellaneous things, if I might want to upgrade something in my PC or something like that, and then clothing, and then car expenses, so car insurance and used tires, something like that, and then sort of annualize that, then add that to your monthly budget, and then figure out how much you want to save per month to have X amount at the end of the year. Sorry, that probably sounds like a mouthful, but that's just the way that I've done it literally since 2021. And I've basically just got a chart seeing like what the total amount of liquid assets I have is up. The crux of all this is that you don't have to be as particular about it as I am, but as with anything, just track it. And there are little apps and stuff that help you track stuff. I think there's a lot of value in actually tracking it yourself with your own tools that you can make with a spreadsheet or something or other. That's what I like. Biggest advice, just track it, because if you don't, you're flying blind. And the same thing goes with training, lifting weights. Track how much weight you're lifting, track it the next day, things like that. I think that just tracking progress is just something that's just so valuable, because if you don't do that, you literally have no idea where you are and where you're going.
Yeah, I agree with that. If you have the right kind of mindset, that can certainly work. If you are lazier, there is also another option method, which is to just not spend money. If you ever think about spending money, just don't do it. Easy
that
as.
is better.
And if you like to have fun like me, you have the middle ground where you don't autistically put every single item into the budget, but you do have a budget, and part of the budget is budgeting for fun. And maybe having a few drinks with the boys, or going out to a restaurant.
That
with
is
a
a part of my
whatever.
budget, my man.
So yeah, budget of fun. I think you got to be realistic with your budget. You definitely got to have it. Planning is one of the the cornerstones of any successful enterprise. And the other part, so definitely have a plan, and always, as Thomas said, you definitely got to save as well. So maybe you're not saving like everything you possibly could if you lived like full monk mode. But you should be seeing your savings go up, because everything else is basically going to rely on you having savings being put away. So once you have those savings, you're going to want to put them into an investment of some kind. And maybe that's something you can talk a bit more about, Thomas, because I think you're a bit more knowledgeable about it than me. But
yeah, well, I was being a bit facetious before, but in honesty, it doesn't hurt to have a critical eye towards what you're spending, doing what James was suggesting before, and having a look at what you're spending your money on and going, did I really need to spend money on that? I spent how much at the pub the other night? Wait, hang on. If I spent all of what I earned last week at the pub in one night, how does that make sense?
Alcohol is a huge thing, and if you can cut that out somewhat, that's when I really started to actually see a difference in the money I was saving. But that's just sequitur. But
yeah, if you've never looked at your budget ever, definitely do that. You have to. You need to know how much you're spending.
The pub isn't a cheap thing anymore. Like, even like 20, 30 years ago, going to the pub could be considered kind of like a down market kind of thing. But now it's like you want to go on a night out. Like, what are you, a minute or something? Like, beer's like $16 now. It's crazy money.
Yeah, that's a really good point as well. Like, money that just sits in the bank is also going down in value due to inflation. So it's definitely something to keep in mind, like purchasing power. So you may be earning money and you may be saving, but if you're not investing it into something else, or diversifying, maybe buying a bit of silver and gold, or if you're into the cryptocurrencies, maybe you've got Bitcoin or something, right? But you don't want to have just like fiat dollars sitting there doing nothing. That you want to turn it into something that's make your money work for you, is the phrase that I was told, right?
And invest it in whatever feels right for you. For example, you could put money in Vanguard. Some people don't like Vanguard. That's fine. Just put it in something better than hemorrhaging its worth inside of a bank. Just pick something, and obviously pick something you understand and as well. For example, don't put money into crypto if you don't know what that crypto is good for, or its use cases, or whether a foundation controls its supply. All those sorts of things.
Can I also interject something here as well? I also will just to offer the sort of like devil's advocate perspective on the just invested thing, there is a general mindset, particularly in the younger generation and Australians, where it's like, oh, investing, this is just like a magic go up machine. I think that the stock market and then crypto have been extraordinarily favorable, seemingly against all odds over the past few years. And if anything, coming up, there is probably a correction due, even though people may not like it. I saw some stats recently where it's sort of like the highest percentage of like American cash available to the consumer ever is now in the stock market. That is generally not a good sign. So don't just think of like, oh, just make your money work. You just put it somewhere. Like things don't always just work out. So I will offer just that counter advice to putting it somewhere. Like I had my money in stocks like a couple of years ago and it went up, and I started to feel not so great about what was happening with the global economy. Seemingly against all odds, everything has kept going up, but there are huge signs right now that everything is quite overbought, and I don't want to just give out the advice for you to just put your money into something out of fear of missing out of it, because bad things do pop for seemingly no reason. Like that's what happened in 2020 with COVID, then 2008, and we are almost like overdue for like a big market correction coming up as well. So that is something to sort of look out for.
Yeah, somebody listens to this show and instantly puts all their money in a bloody cryptocurrency.
Yeah, not financial advice.
Yeah, like cryptocurrency has been extraordinarily favorable, but that doesn't mean that it just is a money go up machine. That's something to know.
This is general advice of making your money work for you, not specific advice. You should do this now or whatever.
Yeah, you've got to be aware, like any investment comes with a risk of some kind. So, and typically, high risk, high reward, low risk, low reward, but there's always an element of risk. You can't sort of mitigate that completely. Yeah.
So yeah, moving on to the career and financial autonomy and whatnot. In order to have a better impact on your life as well as the native in general, having a good career or running your, being respected or knowledgeable or having skills in certain areas obviously has a huge impact. It contributes to you being respected more by your peers, having more opportunities to have more of an impact on the broader Australian life. It seems obvious to say, but not everyone believes this, that a lawyer is more respected than a cleaner overall, or someone with, a qualification, or someone who is a manager in a business. Is respected more and can have a greater impact on society than someone who works at McDonald's at a cash register. So if you want to make positive change in Australia, then looking after your career and how much money you make and all these things are all very useful, especially when it gets to the part when you can start bringing your expertise specifically to the benefit of the business, especially when it comes to bringing your expertise to the benefit of the association. For example, law, or being skilled at organization, or being skilled in finance, or various construction-related work. These are all very valuable and can be made good use out of.
Yeah, definitely. I think that the advice that I would give is to see something where you can actually see the impact in the world. That's why I'm a fan of, engineering as a career path. I think that there's something that's very valuable in seeing something tangible. Like if you actually see your work get built, that's a good feeling. I know a lot of people that went into sort of finance. I think that was like never really my thing, because I prefer to just see my work become tangible in some aspect. And I think that choosing a career path based on what you can actually see it benefiting your people, your country, your society is very, very important. Don't choose a self-absorbed career path. There's probably a lot better ways to make money than the way that I do it, but I think that there's value in actually seeing your real manifestation in the world. And I'm sure that you guys can agree with that as well.
Yeah, for sure. 100% agree. That's why I went down my career path. I wanted to see my will manifested into reality to some extent. And there's lots of employment.
Don't just chase money, is what I would say.
Yeah, and there's lots of employment where you can sort of just, all of your effort can appear to disappear into the ether.
Yeah,
And
I think that if you're just kind of stuck in some like administration role, I think that these roles can sort of just end up really having an adverse effect on your mental health, because you don't essentially see you don't see what the outcome of your effort is, or the outcome of your labor, which that person would bug me. But
yeah, completely.
Yeah, like it's got to be something that you're going to be sane doing as well. Don't just be like, I have to become a lawyer, or I have to have the most money I possibly can if you're gonna burn out, right? Because the burning out is going to cost more than shooting for the stars or whatever, right? You got to make sure it's something realistic. And a lot of the time, it's also a time versus money thing as well. So if you've got a really high power career, high power lawyer, partner in a firm or something, or high power in the stock market, investment, finance world, like you're going to be spending a ton of time on your job where you may not even have time to get involved in like a nationalist group, or your only like involvement may be you'll be able to like donate, which is what I'd recommend to those people. Like if you have no time to get involved in nationalism any other way and you're earning heaps cash, then you basically got to be donating, right? Because the people who have heaps of time, like the exact opposite, and obviously we know in the Australian sphere you do have, not necessarily in the ANA, but in other groups and things like people that are just on Centrelink and do nationalism 24/7. So there's like two different opposing extremes. And most people will sit somewhere in the middle. They should be involved in a nationalist group. But if you're making heaps of money, you're basically just limited to donating. But my view is that wherever you are,
please don't throw your career
you have to be
like away to do anything like that.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. No, you got to look at where you fit in the ecosystem of society, and more in a more limited sense, the society that is the mini society that is the Australian nationalist movement. Like, what is your role? What is your role in that ecosystem? What can you do best? Find that thing and then do it. But yeah, you've got to, I think this is where you got to look at the big picture as well, because some people may say, well, hang on a minute, I can just look out for myself and put all my money and time into investing and, looks maxing at the gym or whatever. But, if the country gets totally overrun by people that are alien, like it doesn't matter how much you've been looks maxing, right? If you're just going to get cut down by some subcontinental. So, yeah, you've got to look at the big picture as well and see that you've got a duty to something bigger than yourself. And a good place to start with that, I think, is actually family, because that's where a lot of people are going to sort of run up against the fact that you can't just be an individual. You've got to look out for other people, whether that's your wife or your wife and your children. But perhaps we could give a little bit of advice on how to get there for the incels whose cause isn't totally hopeless.
Well, the first and most important piece of advice, which may sound painfully generic to some, so I apologize, but not all women, okay? Plenty of women are still excellent. Sure, they're hard to find. Everyone knows that. Good men are hard to find as well. So, if you're not quite matching up, you make yourself a better person and you will attract better women. Pretty obvious, right? Still not necessarily easy, obviously, but getting women. Getting a woman is challenging, but it's definitely worth doing, because you can't make a child by yourself. Can't put it in a box.
Yeah, I can't even like agree more on that not all women thing as well. I think that was a big trap that a lot of these like pickup artist movements and stuff fell into. You'd have all these guys and they'd be like, well, hang on a minute, I've tried every single bar and every single strip club in this city. Like, what are you talking about? There are no good women. It's like, well, hang on a minute, mate. I think there might be something wrong with the premise there. So
exactly.
And that's the thing. Like, if you're after a particular kind of woman, and again, this is kind of narrowing down something Thomas said, you've got to like make yourself into what that woman's going to want. And I'm not talking about, the pickup artist clown act thing where, you're going to twitch your eyebrows in a certain way and this sort of thing to, brainwash her or something. Just talking about, like, if you want a woman that's fit, right, don't be a slob. If you want a woman that likes the outdoors, get involved in hiking and camping and that sort of stuff, or join a hiking group.
Yeah.
that sort of thing, right? So you got to go where the person you want to meet is likely to be, and I think that's where, like, you may meet them, but you probably won't meet them like at the martial arts gym, right? So this is where the other side, I think, that a man needs to have comes in. Like, you should have some sort of more refined aspect to your personality. So for me, that's been dancing. I love to dance. Australian New Vogue, nativist as, but there are other things if that's not your thing. But that, or getting involved in music, or if you're not in the arts so much, it could be through some kind of sport or something like that. But what do you guys think? Maybe James, you haven't really spoken as much on this yet.
Yeah. Just to hop on the previous point, I think that I totally agree with you guys where there's this kind of like black pill, let's say, mostly amongst Gen Z, where it's like, oh, all the women are like this. I'm never gonna find one that they're all sucked up in like this lifestyle and everything. And I still just have to reassure you that even like the girls that you see on Instagram and even the ones that you see on the dating apps, most women aren't like that. Like that, most women actually aren't out at the club every single weekend. That's kind of like it's kind of like a misnomer, and like most women definitely aren't, doing more pernicious things with their time online, let's say. Something that I will add to that, which is maybe sort of, I don't know what to call this advice, but regarding dating apps, I'm actually of the belief that if you, for their intended purpose, they do work. If you actually just put your sort of intention straight on there and you're just completely honest with them when you meet up with them for a coffee or whatever it is, and just say exactly what you're looking for, I've generally found that it's not so much of an issue. I think that most people use dating apps completely incorrectly and for the wrong purpose.
Present an incorrect image of themselves, and then
Yeah. Like I'm wholeheartedly of the belief that you can meet someone on there that actually does have things in common with you that isn't a bad person if you actually just set your intentions correctly on them. That's probably unconventional advice, but I'm totally of the view that if you just state your intentions clearly and just don't stuff people around, you can find someone on there that's just fine.
Yeah. And the other thing is, it basically doesn't matter what most women are like, because you only want one. You only have to find one.
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
Those odds are much, much better when you're not having to sift through tens of thousands of women, whatever.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that a massive thing is just to be honest. Just really be honest with like who you are and like what you're into and what you like. And it really sounds like tired advice, but just don't try to mold yourself around like what they're looking for, because it's just going to end in tears. No one's going to be happy at the end of it. And if it takes a few, hey, this won't work out a couple of times, well, then so be it. That's just simply the way that it has to be, and it's your job as a man to just deal with it and just move on.
Yeah, exactly. Now, in terms of having kids, just wanted to have a brief point here that there's a lot of, shall we say, fear porn online about how expensive children are. They don't actually have to be that expensive. A lot of it's just you and what you want.
I was wondering about that actually.
So, a lot of stuff you'll get from your family or various communities a part of. People love children, and they'll probably be donating. I have bags and bags and bags and bags of children's clothes. I've barely had to buy any for my children. That's just one thing. We've had a cot donated. We've had a pram bought for us. All these things that add up, they'll just often get gifted to you by your loving family, friends, community.
Yeah, and don't be afraid to like reuse stuff between family and friends as well. Like if you can donate like a pram or something, like once your kids are out of that age.
Yeah, and my younger is wearing things that my older wore, even though they're different genders. Doesn't matter.
Thomas, tranny groomer confirmed. No, yeah, like obviously, yeah, it's retarded. Yeah, no, that's fine. It's fine to have clothing. I mean, like when kids are so small as well, like you barely can't tell the difference between the genders anyway. Yeah, I think I'm just digging holes now for myself to fall into.
Based on the charity as well, I will say that Brisbane ANA actually has a baby bonus for our members who have children.
So does Victoria. Yep.
Oh, great.
Yeah, I mean, actually, one thing I wanted to actually say in all seriousness was we've kind of been assuming that people will have networks or friends around them. So
Well,
possibly,
that's critical. You should definitely have that. If you don't have one before you have kids, you should definitely try and get one. So obviously, the best single one that you can have is church. Doesn't really matter what denomination you're in. I don't know if obviously ANA is a non-denominational organisation, so there might be other groups like your local footy club or whatever. If you're in a particularly close one, that could work. But
yeah,
stalling
and
here.
obviously ANA itself, right, or
Yeah,
whatever nationalist group you're involved in. Yeah, you're going to meet a lot of people that have similar values to you, right? If you're listening to a show like this, if you're involved in the nationalist movement, I mean, if you have nationalist values, right, you probably aren't going to feel comfortable meeting like random degenerates at university or whatever. Like, so
mm,
you don't need to stress about things like that. Just go to places where people are going to have the same values as you. So yeah, if you are like, as most of us are, very traditional, very conservative, yeah, whatever church or sect or whatever you're part of, you're going to meet people that have those more conservative values, right? Unless it's Rastafarian or something. And yeah, and if you're a nationalist, you join ANA, you're going to meet people that have nationalist values. So don't go, I guess, looking for friends in the wrong places. Like I
yeah,
barely got any friends from like high school or anything that I catch up with anymore. Like I think as you age, you go through different stages, and you might have like friends for one part of your life, but then as
yeah,
you get older and you move into a different stage, you'll pick up like a different circle of friends that more reflects your like mature personality, your own preferences and things that you've sort of chosen for yourself, rather than just being, thrust in a classroom, 2B, hallway
yeah,
6, like, yeah.
yeah, exactly right. Uh,
Yeah, I don't think we really need to talk about friends and family beyond that. I think that's probably like extensive enough.
yeah.
Political and organizational theory. I mean, we've kind of been talking about ANA already. So, Thomas, do you want to take us away on this one?
Well, you could view this as sort of like history. History should be viewed to a large extent in terms of learning from the best and avoiding the worst. And with politics, it's much the same. In any country, there's been a myriad of failures, and Australia is no different. And you take what you like from a group. With nationalist politics, there's a myriad of different ways of doing some different systems that exist, and we can learn from not just Australia but everywhere around the world. And so one of the beauties of learning politics from around the world is you get to see different situations. You can be more comfortable learning from nationalist ideologues, but their system might not be entirely parallel to your experience. So, for example, a lot of people get inspiration from various different problems that existed in different countries from, say, the 20s and 30s in Europe, or from the 1890s in Australia, or even the early 1800s in Australia. But they may not be accurate to the problems you see existing in Australia now. Not 100% anyway. So depending on the way that you view our problems, having this, I guess, political and organizational education can help you identify the way that we should approach the different problems that exist in our country today. So does that make sense to people?
Yeah, sure. Like it could be a really simple one, like Grant's go-to example of nationalist groups in the past where it's been very informal, unlike ANA. So ANA's got a constitution, elected committees, and so on, and accountability. But in the past, you've had these groups where people are like, trust me, bro, give me your money, I'll look after it. And you turn around, the group's gone, and the leader's picked up a new ute or whatever. Like it's obviously.
Yeah, that's a very hypothetical example, mate.
Not necessarily saying pointing fingers at anyone. Yeah, so you've got to watch out for the problems of the past and just not repeat them with a concrete example of that. But yeah, I think the key point you made as well is the difference that you've got to recognize. So you can't necessarily be like, I think I said this in like 1 or 2 shows ago, Weimar conditions, Weimar solutions. Well, hang on a minute. There's a whole bunch of differences between Weimar Germany just coming out of a massive war that is lost with hyperinflation and Australia now. As bad as Australia is, we're not that bad. We don't have government-sponsored right-wing paramilitaries running around either, right? So it's a completely different situation.
Yeah, and if
the profile of threat is completely different today. It's, we're sort of faced with this kind of like top-down, institutional sort of like brainwashing, telling us that we don't have an identity. And then with this kind of like bio-Leninistic approach to sort of like take the founding stock down. It's a very, very unique problem to this time.
Yeah, and a lot of our ideas are focused around this idea of mass movement still, and the idea that you can get thousands, hundreds of thousands of people on the streets all in the same place. It's a very 20th century idea. We don't have the conditions for that pretty much anywhere in the West right now. Because in order for something like that to happen, there needs to be this massive mobilization taking place. And we don't have hundredth of the power required to do that. So in order to build up to a point where something like that's even possible, so much behind the scenes needs to take place, and to be men with, power and courage to stand up for certain things, money, sponsoring it, positive media everywhere. These things don't appear just out of the ether. And when they do, on a weird occasion like anti-COVID protests, they're gone again, like a flash in the pan.
Yeah, spot on. Where are all those freedom boomers now? They're just being sort of channeled into, pressure release valve sort of things.
Yeah. So in terms of long-lived political change in this country, it needs to be slow, steady, methodical, powerful, and not gone in an instant.
Yeah, we have to have our guys actually participating in civic society in a respectful and dignified way, and really just making sure that like our people are just represented well with the most sort of like dignity in their personal and civic lives. I think that no movement is going to have credibility until that's actually achieved.
Yeah, sure. And the response we often get is like, well, we don't have time for that. Your approach is too slow. We need to be doing stuff right now that's, going to get this problem dealt with as quickly as possible, which may have to be like a mass movement in the streets marching up to Canberra, which the freedom people did try, and they just set up the sound wave emitters or whatever and got rid of them. So we don't have the popular support for even that sort of thing, which is most people, and many more people were awake to the issues with the COVID lockdowns and all that. But what I'd say to those people who think, well, we don't have enough time to do it slowly is like, well, there's no point in having another movement that just runs for a few years or a decade at most and then fizzles out. Everything's worse and everyone's starting from scratch again. It's better that, putting on my black pillar hat, maybe we lose, half or, 3/4 of the country or something. But if we keep a quarter of the country with our people in it, with good demographics, with good business and all that other stuff, then we're keeping more than we will if we just have these constant movements that just fizzle out, burn out, go to zero, straight to zero.
Yeah, not getting emotional is a huge thing. Like, you just have to remain completely steadfast in like what you're doing in professional, personal, civic life, and just keep carrying on.
Yeah, you just got to be staunch and be true to yourself. Like, that's what I'll say. Like, that's true for a lot of things. Like, just don't be bent in different directions based on media or what all your aunts and uncles are telling you or whatever it may be, right? Just be true to yourself and stay the course. And, people aren't going to fight and die for like AI generated images of, Stockman or whatever. Or you need something real. So you need a real community, and you need real participation and preservation of Australian culture. Like everything, I think that's one of the things that's kind of allowed multiculturalism to be so successful, is that people were already detached from their culture by the sort of capitalist obsession with these, cheap commodities and different things. And I quoted a poem once a few shows ago, maybe it was quite a few shows ago at this point, but one of the Bruce Dorr poems, where he's talking about the rise of suburbia and television media, and he says, Bobby Dazzlers and department stores and all of this sort of stuff. And I think that was like the first stage of separating people from more authentic, rooted culture, because cultures, it's related to the word agriculture. It's something that's earthy and concrete. It's also related to cult, speaking of, being part of a religious community and all of that. So you've got to have all those more authentic things. If you're just, I'd say, floating through life, floating through the department stores and that sort of aspect of things, your Netflix and all this other stuff, like throw your TV out the window is my attitude to that. You don't necessarily have to be a total ascetic, and you can still watch stuff on your PC or whatever, but you definitely don't need Netflix and all this other nonsense. There's so many of them now as well. But
that's a great way of not spending money. Going back to the earlier point, just throw out your TV and all those subscriptions. Throw them out.
James, what do you think?
Yeah, mate, definitely. I think there's probably ways to streamline your consciousness as well. A couple of years ago, I did a pretty big sort of like social media purge as well. It's probably a good one. I went from having sort of like, I guess, an Instagram account to just sort of having like basically personal contacts on my phone that I knew were gonna reach out, if I was ever actually like in need, or like vice versa. So I think that's probably an important one. We're talking about sort of like throwing the TV out the window, but like I think that there's probably like a pretty solid case to be made for just like streamlining your life in terms of like personal contacts and acquaintances as well. And I think that just keeping people in your life that are positive, and then keeping people out of your life that are maybe like more materialistic or just want to go drinking every weekend is probably not so much a good use to have them in your consciousness, because if you're just doing the same thing with the same people every single weekend, it's not very productive. Well, I think most of us have been there at some point.
Oh yeah, well, I think the hustlers have a point when they say surround yourself with the sorts of people that you want to be. If you're just hanging around a bunch of people you've always hung around with, basically just a bunch of alcoholics, well, it doesn't bode well for you.
Yeah, there's a lot of sort of groups that will sort of meet up and be based, but they're really just like a drinking group as well. So if you're going to get involved with something IRL, avoid the groups that are just drinking groups. There are a lot out there. Just drinking with other people that are quote unquote based isn't going to do anything.
Yeah, we're going to do something about history and culture, just in terms of like nativist lifestyle, culture, important.
I think we've kind of covered it implicitly in a few different places, but I mean, listening to our show, you get a bit of an idea of things you can do. You get it, start reading a bit of Aussie poetry or Aussie literature.
Well, that's exactly right.
Words on pages. You can, watch Aussie movies, New Wave, Mad Max, the original, plus others. There's plenty of movies with Peter Weir, Gallipoli, Picnic at Hanging Rock, all sorts of things that you can get into. And, I mentioned New Vogue dancing. So that's an Australian style. If you want to get out there and meet girls, actually, I wouldn't necessarily recommend the dance girls. Some of them are pretty bad as well. But here we go. Here comes the black pills. No. Or get into your Australian music. All these sort of very simple things, right? I think it helps to be part of a group like the Australian Natives, because you meet people who are just naturally interested in one part of Australian culture or another, and are really knowledgeable about it and can get you started on it. And with history, obviously you can't avoid the words on pages for the most part. You got to do a bit of reading, but you don't necessarily have to be a huge history nerd. You might just be interested in one part or just the rough outline. And we plan to keep doing shows on history. We've already done a few on we did the early settlement of New South Wales. We've done what else have we done? We've done Jack Lang and that period of time, the interwar period, and a few other ones. It's too late for me to even think of what I've done. So yeah, just go through the shows. You can pick up some culture history that way. Go through the Nativist wiki. But Thomas, did you have anything you wanted to specifically say on this point?
Yeah, just it can be a bit intimidating for people who, like myself, didn't pay much attention to Australian history when they were at school. So you don't have to be a complete whiz-bang at Australian History to be a part of ANA. You can just join and then sort of get all of that knowledge and goodness and culture in slowly over time. That's perfectly fine. Don't feel as if this is all too intimidating. I can't get involved.
Yep. James?
Yeah, I would say that I think, like, thinking back on this show, I'm a big believer in aiming your life in a certain direction. You want to aim your career in a certain direction. Make sure you actually have an aim with what you want to get out of the world and what you want to put back into it. Aim your health in a certain way. Aim your finances in a certain way. Actually have a goal in mind and track it all as well. With your career, definitely don't just go into something just for the money. I mean, like, while you might, of course, make a lot of money, it's probably not actually, it may well actually be a pursuit that's probably not in the best interests of Australia. Like, it seems that a lot of, like, it seems that a lot of people that end up having a lot of say in, the sort of detrimental policies of Australia, like mass migration, sort of pull various levers in the sort of property market and things like that. So definitely try to contribute to Australia through your career in a positive way, is my main advice.
Yeah, for sure. Completely.
No worries. Any other topics that we've missed?
Nope. That's everything.
No. All good, James?
I think that's just about it for me, mate.
Yeah, no worries. And I'm sure if people want advice on specific stuff, we can always do another advice show, but they can raise it in the questions. So as usual, let us know in the comments what topics you'd like to hear about from us, or if there's a particular topic relating to Australia, the ANA, that you'd like us to do a show on. As always, I'd encourage all our supporters in the audience to make sure you like and subscribe and share our content far and wide. We'd love to share our show with as many good Aussies as possible. And lastly, if you want to reach out, you can find us at ausnatives.org. That's AUSNATIVES.org. Signing off.
Here in this God-given land of ours, Australia, this proud possession, our own piece of earth, that was built by our fathers who pioneered our heritage. Here in Australia, the land of our birth. God bless Australia, God bless Australia, all of the Anzac, the strong and the free. It's a homeland, our own land, to cherish for eternity. God bless Australia, the land of the free. Here in Australia, we treasure love and liberty, our way of life, all for one, one for all. We're a peace-loving race, but should danger ever threaten us, let the world